Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Black Lotus podcast. Today will just be me, MF, and Nappy P hosting it, and we're welcoming our friend, the Crow Show, today to enter our brave space.
Yes, today we're going to be having some talk about some of the things that he and his family have gone through, some perspective experiences that may be uncomfortable, so be warned to be prepared
Mhm.
or to be, silent. We appreciate, spectators, comments, messages. We won't be paying too much attention to the chat, but we will have moderators present. So feel free to join our Babes Brace and become enlightened.
Oh, I like that. Enlightened. Absolutely. So, Crow, tell us a little bit about yourself, man.
Hey, hello. Thank you for that nice introduction, and thanks for the invite to be on your podcast. Uh,
Absolutely.
I'm I'm the Crow Show. I stream on Twitch, variety streamer. Um, Mostly play Dead by Daylight these days. But today I just wanted to take the opportunity to talk to y'all about the experiences my family have gone through with something called residential schools. Do you want me to jump into it, or are we gonna?
Yeah, like you know what? One thing I want to mention, like me and we're all Canadian here, right? It's a huge deal, right, for us to speak about this today because in regards to the media, you're looking at U.S. media dominating all of our news here in North America. Like I'm sorry to say, but it's true, right? And the subjects and the issues that we have in Canada is never addressed. You know, like we all took social studies in school, and the fact that residential schools was not mentioned at all, and it was almost like glazed over. um it's concerning, right? Like when was the last residential school that was even closed in Canada? Like we're talking about something fairly recent. Like I think 1996 is the last time when the last school was closed, right? Like I was 6 years old, so by the time I got into high school, this should be a subject that we should have been aware about. So yeah, tell us a little bit more about it, Crow.
Yeah. Okay. So some people watching or listening might be going, "Well, what's residential school?" Well, residential schools were set up by the Canadian Church and government. Um, I believe at one time they had about 60 of them operating across Canada. Um, it was all Indigenous children that were forcefully taken from their families and forced to attend these schools. And the schools were originally created to solve the quote unquote Indian problem. So the idea was to assimilate us into Canadian culture, essentially beat and rape the culture out of us by quote unquote educating us by religious figures like priests, brothers, and nuns. Um, the issue with these schools is they were very the children were not well fed. They didn't have access to good health care. They didn't have access to their traditional um, family settings, being raised by their parents or their grandparents or the whole village kind of thing. Um, they were malnourished. And a large number, a very high percentage of children died while attending these schools. So it's something that, it started. I think the first school opened in 1883 and the last one opened in 1996. And yeah, my father attended one of them. My mother attended one of them. But another way to put that is, my father was snatched from his parents and placed into these schools. So still a lot of hurt out there among our people for these schools.
Right. And do you feel that, like, in regards to touching on that, because your mother and father were both victims of the residential school system, like, what kind of trauma do you feel that you have due to this, right? Due to their experiences?
Right. Well, the thing is, my parents. I'll just put this out there and quick trigger warning: the some people might feel a little upset if you hear these things, but there's no real easy way to put it. Both of my parents were beaten and raped by priests in these schools, so they didn't have a fair chance at being children. So they missed out on a lot of basic humanity things that all of us, I hope all of us here and watching, have experienced. So you know there were times growing up where, because my father experienced so much pain and so much hardship as a child and so much shame, there were times when I don't think he knew how to deal with us as children, because the only thing he was taught was to beat, to get beat, to correct things like speaking the native tongue. And he never did. He was actually quite gentle with us. So
Do you feel that like there's still very strong prejudice? Like what? Okay, like let me reword that. What kind of prejudice did you yourself face? Being indigenous here in Canada, growing up.
So the things that I dealt with growing up, there's a lot of stereotypes out there. Drunk, lazy Indian is a very common phrase that I heard quite a bit. Now the thing is, Indigenous people in Canada do suffer with alcoholism and drug abuse, and more often than not, it's a form of self medication to deal with the harms of growing up. And residential school kids were actually called residential school survivors, because so few of them actually lived to tell the tale of going to these schools. Um, so dealing with people calling me a drunk, lazy Indian, even when I was a kid, I didn't even know what that meant. So they obviously learned those terms from their parents and their
Mm,
grandparents. And I grew up with a lot of shame. I would say it wasn't until probably uh, until I was into my 20s where I started feeling comfortable with my skin and my culture and being proud of who I am. Um, yeah, I felt a great deal of shame because of all the stereotypes out there of people calling us drunk, lazy Indians. And the thing is, like, people would always say, go get a job, get a real job. They always say that to homeless Indigenous people. The thing is, my generation was the first to receive an actual fair shot at a real education. My parents didn't have a real education. They're kind of the exception to the rule in terms of uh, success for our people. Like, my father has many cousins who actually, commit suicide because they couldn't deal with the pain that was inflicted upon them by the church and government. So yeah, it's just it was really tough growing up. Nowadays, I'm super proud. I hold my head up high, and I just feel bad if anybody hurls any kind of stereotypical insults at me or anybody in my family.
okay. Well, you know what? And you should be proud, right? In terms of life in Canada in our day and age, I think with our generation, we push to be a lot more accepting, right? And push for a little bit of more equal ground. But in terms of the treatment of Indigenous people, I feel like a lot of the times it's taken to the point where it's almost swept under the rug, right? So
Oh
um,
yeah,
I hope you don't mind me asking. So do you mind? You did mention that your dad was in a residential school, right? So I'll post the link for the documentary in the chat afterwards. But do
right.
you mind kind of sharing a little bit about that? Just
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, so the residential school he went to is called Cooper Island Residential School. It's actually where we grew up. And the documentary you're going to link a little bit later, it's about 40 minutes long, and they interview a bunch of people uh, and talk about their experiences there. And my father's experience with um, coping with that, with coming out with that information, was really hard on him at first, and it still is, but it's therapeutic to him now. Um, but I guess one night, like my father, he doesn't like sleeping in a dark room, and as a young man, he would always have a nightlight on in the room at all times. And my mom would ask him like, "Why do you need that?" And he'd be like, "Oh, I stubbed my toe, and I don't want to stub my toe." And then he would put it in the bedroom, put it in the hallway. And I remember this when I was a little kid, and I loved it because if I had to get up to go to the bathroom, I could see where I was going,
Right.
and I wasn't
Mhm.
afraid of the dark because of that. But um, finally, after asking my father many many times, because my mom, women know they have that intuition when we're telling them some bullshit. So she finally said, tell me what's up. What's up with the nightlights? And my dad said it reminds me of the dark room I was in when the priest sexually assaulted me when I was a little boy, and he's afraid of the dark because of that. And
Right.
I think a part of that passed down to me because I'm afraid of the dark too, and I have no real reason. It's just something that is there with me. But equipped with that information, I try to conquer it whenever I can. So,
Right. So, in this documentary, right, you mentioned that your father was in it, and who else was in it?
oh right, yeah, my uncle and some of their cousins and other people who attended those schools.
Okay. So, is there like a follow up in regards to this?
They actually are working on a follow up.
Hmm.
It's in post production. Um, I believe they've shot all the footage. They're just in the post production, editing and mastering the audio, stuff like that. I don't know the full details on that, but I could definitely forward it to you when the follow up is finished.
Yeah, absolutely. So, when you're looking at everyone who was in this documentary, is everyone like okay today?
Well, that's the thing. For the first documentary, my father and my uncle are the only two remaining people still alive, and those people were, well, I wouldn't say fairly young, but they did die to circumstances usually involving substance abuse because they self-medicate kind of thing.
Mhm.
So, and the
That's
thing is, like one of the things I always heard growing up is get over it. That didn't happen to you, you know. Um, they didn't do anything to you, but the children of those survivors um, suffered quite a bit as well because their parents became alcoholics. Their parents abused the harshest drugs you could imagine. And so their kids, a lot of them didn't have a fair childhood. I'm one of the lucky ones who had a really good childhood. My parents did everything they could to um, put us in a position to succeed in this world. But not all of my friends enjoyed that. And so it just started a cycle that is still going of children um, being surrounded by alcoholics and drug addicts because their parents were like that.
so in regards to that, like, thank you for sharing all of that. Right. So we have a little bit of do you mind doing just some Q&As just in regards to just some stigmas we want to clear out?
Oh, sure. Yeah. Yeah. If
Okay.
anything's too harsh, I'll say pass, but I'm pretty
Absolutely.
open. Yeah.
No, for sure. Nikki, do you want to start?
Uh, First, no, I was just gonna say, so as you were speaking to the residential, what was it, system?
Residential
homes,
school system, yeah.
school system. So you would say that your father is a survivor of
Mhm.
that system, and then as well as that documentary, since it references and attests to the struggle of a bunch of people that struggled in many different ways, and the ways they coped, unfortunately, took their lives frequently.
Mhm.
So that kind of puts parents in a hard spot, because if you survive something, the trauma still sticks with you. And even though, you try to do your best for your kids and for the future, there's still certain things you won't be able to or even understand to, so that in itself leaves a gap for, children today, which is, um, how would I say this? Something that you've conquered
Yeah.
to a degree, you would say.
Mhm. Oh, yeah.
Is there anything
Absolutely.
particular that you can attribute to that in your life? Like maybe there's a person or an event, or a group maybe that you interacted with.
Right. Yeah, that's a good question. I would say that what's contributed to that is just staying close to both my parents and everybody around that whole situation. We've been very, very lucky that we're still really close. I still talk to them frequently. Um, my parents, right from the beginning of my father coming out with his story, um, they were always very upfront with us and saying, "Here's what happened to us." And I think that their openness to share with us that really harsh information, right out of the gate, helped a lot in terms of making us aware of the evil things that exist in this world, and just making us understand our father just a little bit more.
Right.
We could never fully understand what he went through,
Hmm.
but if we know why he has hangups or around the church, for example,
Hmm.
um, why he feels upset anytime you hear about children getting hurt in any way, whether it's physical or sexual.
Hmm.
The Yeah, just the closeness with my parents, the communication, and us staying strong really helped me conquer these things. And I think to an extent I did struggle. It'll always hurt, right? Like it'll always be there.
Yeah.
Um, as long as we're conscious of what happened and what we can do to prevent that in the future, I think we'll be, you know, when Sarah and me, my wife, when we have a child, we'll be better equipped for that.
Absolutely.
Hmm. Stronger for it.
Yeah,
Hmm. Okay, so in regards to the response to the closure of the residential school system, right? Like, what has the government done to essentially make up for a whole generation of people who, for committing genocide, essentially, right? Because you're
yeah,
looking at them bringing these kids away from their parents and taking away their culture.
right. Well, there have been, I believe Stephen Harper, was it Harper? I
That's,
think he was the first prime minister to issue an apology.
yeah, I think he was still in office at the time.
Yeah,
A
and
lot
then
of, sorry, go
a
on.
bunch of oh yeah, and a bunch of premiers offered an apology, and there have been payments issued to survivors. It hasn't been very much though. I can't think of any figure, um, but yeah, there has been money paid out to folks who are still here, and you know, given the opportunity, I'm sure they'd take a proper education over some kind of small payment to
Mhm.
say sorry. Uh, I, and I believe I didn't do the research on this, but I believe that residential schools are making their way into the education system for Canada in terms of like teaching the youth about these things, which I think is a positive step.
I think it's a very positive step. I think it's almost mandatory at this point,
Hmm. Oh
right?
yeah,
because, in terms of the stigma against Indigenous people in Canada, it's very heavy, right? Like it's very heavy
Oh
when
yeah.
you look at police statistics in the United States versus Canada with police brutality. You're looking at Native people actually overrunning the black man
Hmm.
statistic, right? But it's never
Yeah.
something that's addressed. So another
Yeah.
question I want to ask is that you're looking at this residential school system essentially damaging, traumatizing a whole generation of people who now are having children, right? And children are affected by it. You did mention that you are having that you were the exception to the rule, right?
Hmm.
So can you
Yeah.
explain more to what the rule is in regards to the children who of survivors, and also at this point what can essentially uplift the Indigenous community to be able to get more equal footing with everyone else?
Right. Well, the rule, and this might put me in a bit of hot water, but it's just reality. I've seen
Brave
it.
space.
Yeah.
Brave space.
The the rule would be that the people who did live through and survive residential schools um, mimic the behavior that was passed down to them as children. So they beat their own children, or they, like I said, they abuse alcohol or drugs as a way of self-medicating because the Canadian government and the church um, damaged their way of life and did nothing to repair or try to heal them. So it wasn't until like the late 90s or early 2000s when the Canadian government started to go, okay, yeah, yeah, we fucked up. Um, so yeah, in the documentary, this is like a minor spoiler, minor trigger alert, I guess you could say. One of the men interviewed talked about how he hurt so much, and I believe he talked about abusing alcohol and I mean, drugs. Um, he said he wanted to hurt somebody else the way he was hurting, and he actually murdered his daughter, which is extreme. Now, if he wasn't feeling that hurt from the abuse he suffered as a child, life would be so much different, right? So, that's like the most extreme example of how that generation passed their hurt onto this one. So uh,
Unimaginable.
yeah, unimaginable. So and I did. There were folks from my community who were my age as well. Um, I'm actually turning. What am I turning? 42 in September, a couple months from now. There were folks in my age group who also became alcoholics, who also abused drugs. And there's this one really sad story of one of my childhood friends. And of course, we don't know the full circumstances, but the story that was told is he got so drunk in a very cold part of Canada that he got lost and froze to death. Um, and his entire family was residential school survivors. So
Mm.
um, it's super sad, super super. I still think of him. We knew each
Of
other when
course.
we were little boys, uh,
Mhm.
but I still think about the times
Yep.
of us
Part of
Mm-hmm.
you.
running around.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. Contributed
And
to who you are today, right?
yeah, and I think about how much that sucks, how much it hurts to have these memories, have these events happen in my life, and I think about the majority of Canada, which is Caucasians. Uh, None of my Caucasian friends have stories like this. None of them have parents who survived elementary school system in Canada. Um, you know, None of them have um, mass amounts of family who are alcoholics and drug addicts and pass it on to their children. Like, yeah, sure, some we all do it to an extent, but like to the extent we have, Um, I think about that a lot too.
Yeah, it's a little bit unbelievable, but to the extent of the, I guess, kind of prejudice to sweeping it under the rug and kind of, turning a shoulder, a blind eye to when you see certain, not even certain, just indigenous people in general. I think a lot of people just, it's just something, if you don't pay any attention to it, it's not there, it's not happening. And if nobody's bringing it up, it's nothing you have to worry about. So a lot of people just walk on by, look the other way, don't talk about it. And that has led to a huge misinformation between what is reality and what is assumed reality, because I think there's a huge misconception that indigenous people are given specific support by the government to get ahead in life, or
Hmm.
to prosper, like free education or government grants or however many things that are probably are groundless, baseless rumors that probably just spread everywhere. So I think that
Right.
that's something that needs to be addressed, and this is shocking, jaw-dropping information that's
Hmm.
completely blowing my mind. But do you have any information or any type of,
Clarification.
yeah, clarification on that type of system, or where that
Right.
misinformation may come from, or
Yeah.
where you can go to find out information?
Yeah. There is a little bit of grounds to the education stuff. Indian bands do have a level of funding for education
Hmm.
where they do pay for the tuition of X amount of students. It's not a high amount, and from what I understand, the budget is super low compared to when I went to college. Now, I did get funding. I did get my courses paid for to go
Hmm.
to. I actually set out to become an elementary teacher. I was not vibing with that program, so I said that's not for me.
Fair enough.
Uh,
Yeah.
and then I went into computer studies. Now I'm working in the IT field. So the year and a half, 2 year course that I took that was funded by the Indian band.
Right.
I'm very very grateful for that. Um, and I did take a bit of flack for that too, even being in college. I remember this one woman approached me after class, and she seemed nice at first. She was like, "Hey, what, you're native, right?" And I was like, "Yeah." She was like, "Oh, so you're getting paid to be here, right?" And I was like, "Um, no, I'm not. I'm not getting paid to be here. I'm just here to get an education." And she
Hmm.
was like, "Oh, but you're accepting handouts from your band, right?" And I said, "No. My band did pay for my education, and I'm very grateful. I'm here just to get an education." She's like, "Well, where's mine?" And I'll never forget. Like, she completely, like, I was just
Blindsided
walking to
you.
my yeah, I was just walking to my car, and she just attacked me. And I said, "Hey,
Wow.
listen, I'm not. I. It seems like you have your mind made up on whatever you have in your brain." I said, if we could switch spots, if I could be a white person and you can be a native person, I'd love to walk in your shoes for a little bit, because
Hmm.
for the shit that I have to deal with in order to get this free education that
Hmm.
and me being paid to be here, I was like, I would much rather have the privileged life. And she kind of just dropped her jaw and
Yeah.
just stood there. And but
Yeah.
yeah, that there is some grounds there. But I would say, in terms of, that was the last time I enjoyed um any kind of support that, quote unquote, put me ahead.
Hmm.
Um yeah, there's, a lot of people think that we don't pay taxes. I'd love to show you my pay stub where,
Hmm.
it feels like 60% of my paycheck goes to whatever.
Yeah.
I'm definitely contributing to society.
Hmm.
And yeah, I don't enjoy anything like that. And when we have children, that education fund probably won't be there.
Right.
And Yeah.
So, in regards to that educational fund, is that like something that's community based? Is it like reservation based? Is it provincial based? You know, like how
It's
does that work?
I'm not 100% sure how it works, but each band, which is usually one Indian band per reserve, has funds allocated to them by the Canadian government. They're like, here's your education fund. And so, certain number of kids or adults get to go to whatever school.
So,
And
sorry, just a follow up question to that. So you mentioned earlier, like you said that like it doesn't pay for very many kids, right, to go to
mhm,
school. So how
yeah.
many do you think it would actually like fund to get a proper secondary education? And just the community itself, what is the stigma behind going to get a second education or a secondary education?
I'm not sure how many of funded or funds currently. Um, when I was going to school, there was maybe a dozen of us, maybe less, out of hundreds or a couple thousand of us, right? And yeah, the percentage was very low. Um, and again, I'm not too familiar with how it works, how it's determined, um, or even what exists today. Uh, to get that question, we'd have to contact the band office and
Hmm.
find out. And I'm not sure what kind of information we could get from them, but they would
Is
be
it
the folks who
disclosed?
know.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. Do you have like guesswork? So it was like half a dozen, I guess, when you were taking advantage of that program. So,
Hmm.
in regards to that, though, like with that whole system, do you still feel that like systematic racism towards Aboriginal people still exists today? Like systematic, I'm talking about from like the top down.
Right. It definitely does. Yeah. It definitely does because, uh, well, my office is currently closed. I work in a relatively large office.
Hmm.
Um, and I can go weeks and weeks and weeks downtown Victoria. Um, and I'm the only native guy who has like a good career. The only other native people I usually see, they're never in my office. That's for sure. There's actually one other native person who works in my office, and um, we always say hello and go out of our way to kind of touch base. But when you walk around and you don't see anybody else who looks like you, that alone is one of the systems of racism. When and a big part of it too is um, our people may not be qualified to be in the positions that I'm in or around because they just didn't get the education. And yeah, in terms of Um, homelessness is a big issue with our people. That you do see a lot of homeless Indigenous people. And there's a lot of really negative stereotypes around that. So, seeing homeless people and not seeing any fellow Native people in positions of power, like position of power, there's none of us in power, and I've never seen a Native person in power in the few companies I've worked for in IT. um, they do exist. I definitely do converse with some through social networks and whatnot. Um, but we're in a very, very small minority. And, but yeah, when you look around and don't see anybody else who looks like you, uh, that's an indicator that the system is still fully functioning.
Hmm.
That's a form of oppression.
It is. Yeah.
Do you feel that that in itself is an after effect of the system you grew up in, which in itself inhibits your community and your culture from supporting itself and one another to propel yourselves forward?
Yeah, I think so. I think that, and of course, I cannot speak on behalf of like everybody, but I
Yeah.
do believe that there is a feeling that in our people that when you grow up on the reserve, you're just going to live there the rest of your life, kind of thing, and going to be stuck in that life. Now, saying that, might get me in a bit of trouble, but there are people who definitely do live like that, and for some of those people, um, I can see why. When I went to college, when I went to those courses, um, I saw even less Native people there than I do at my work. Um, and getting out into the quote unquote real world, um, it can be really tough to receive education from people who don't look like you, to work with people who don't look like you, and to never see anybody who looks like you. The people who can relate to you, just to never ever talk to them.
Hmm.
Um, it's really tough. And I've been in IT for I'd say about 15, 16 years or something like that. And not once have I had an indigenous boss in any capacity above me. Um,
Hmm.
and I don't think I've had an indigenous. Oh, I had one guy who is indigenous who worked with me, and he was only there for like 5 or 6 months, and he moved on to something else. Um, so yeah, I think just the fact that it's hard to relate to others, keeps people feeling like less important than the majority.
So, wow. Okay. So, in regards to that, like with your culture, like your parents' cultures, do you guys still ever try to stay in tune with any of that?
We do. Yeah, it's been a while for me because I'm pretty far away from, well, not super far away from home. But I am initiated into my father's culture in a very sacred ceremony that I can't really talk about because it's very
Hmm.
sacred and very ceremonial.
Yeah.
Um, it's been a while since I've practiced that, but I do certainly conduct myself with those values that I learned from that aspect of my culture. So it's definitely shaped who I am and the way I conduct myself.
That's awesome. Do you speak language?
I don't know. And that's one thing that I struggled with growing up. And it wasn't until maybe 5 years ago um, that I stopped feeling shame about that. I used to feel really, really sad and like embarrassed. Like I can't speak my native tongue. Um, my native tongue would be something called Hulkaminam. That's the people in my region spoke that language. Um, and the reason I can't speak it is it was quite literally beaten out of our people. My father doesn't speak it, so he was not able to teach me growing up, and certainly not taught in the education system. So um, it's one of those things that uh, it's by design, right? The Canadian government wanted that to be the case. So
Yeah. What do you feel that like what do you feel would be something that society can do? Because we are moving into this new era where everyone is fighting for equality across the board, right? So,
right.
what do you feel that people who are non indigenous, outside of just getting more awareness, can do to assist the community in propelling forward?
Right. I would say that things that non-indigenous people can do is educate themselves, talk to us. We're going to be the best source in terms of what to learn from. Like there's lots of articles out there. BuzzFeed, CBC, you name it. There's lots out there. Uh, but our sort of way of learning is a very oral tradition. So you know my people have never had textbooks of written history and stuff like that. um, so I think just talking to people, educating themselves, teaching their children uh, to accept everybody,
Hmm.
not just indigenous people, but every visible minority they may run into. Um, I always say life's a lot easier when you just love everybody, and that may sound kind of hippy dippy, but I think that a lot of this could be avoided if children learned not to hate from their parents and their grandparents.
Absolutely. I have a question from the chat there. Can you read it out there, Nikki? From Neon Ninja.
What is it here? Are there any things part of your culture that you share with your family together?
Um, Things that we share culturally, I would say food is a big one. Food is very important in our culture, and so um, there's kind of a phrase among indigenous people. You never let your guests leave hungry, and I believe that 1,000%. Anytime somebody comes to my house, I've got to cook them dinner, cook them lunch, breakfast, whatever. Make sure they're well fed. So um, yeah, I just love feeding people. I love sharing stories, not just indigenous stories too, but you can see I've got a big movie collection behind me.
Mhm,
And I think that's why I vibe with movies so much is their storytelling, and that was our history for us. It's telling stories.
that's the medium.
Yeah,
I think food is a big thing in all cultures actually, and a
yeah.
great
Oh yeah.
social ground in general.
Oh yeah.
Breaking bread is
Hmm.
definitely a great thing.
I'm curious though, like I'm not aware like at all, but can you share us some like kind of native like dishes that might or might not be your favorite?
Yeah. One of my favorites is actually probably the most simple one. It's just canned sockeye salmon. What you do is you take well, I guess it's jarred, canned, whatever term you want to use. Take it out of the jar. You throw it in a bowl. If there's any little bones in there, you take the little bones out. You put some mayonnaise in there and some onions and some green onions. Mix it all up. It becomes almost like tuna kind of thing. You just put that between two pieces of bread, and it's the most delicious thing ever. So canned sockeyed salmon is incredible. It's something that when I go visit my family on the northern tip of the island, it's something I look forward to because they catch it fresh and they prepare it fresh and they take a lot of pride in preparing the food and serving it to families. So
Oh, that's
it's a really
awesome.
big deal. Yeah.
Is
Tastes
there
like
like
home.
yeah, is there like a staple? You know how like for Asian people, for instance, our biggest staple is rice, right?
Right.
So is yeah, so is
Yeah.
there like kind of like a name?
Culturally associated food
Yeah,
group.
yeah, that you guys
They're
do. Like that's
yeah.
because I'm not too sure if like different indigenous people like cook different things, right? Like how,
Yeah.
with Asian people there's different cuisine, but I'm not too sure if there is for you guys, but is there like one staple? Because I know the only
Well,
thing that I've ever tried was the fried bread that you guys
oh
do.
yeah.
And
Yeah,
what is it
fried
called?
bread is yeah, a bannock.
Yeah. Oh
Bannock,
my
yeah,
god.
that's probably the most common like modern staple because it's spread throughout all of North America. And the funny thing is, we didn't have bread in our diet, right? Like we weren't baking bread back in the day. And I think that's why our people struggle with carbs. That's why I abandoned carbs about a year ago.
Hmm.
Um, but it's actually a regional thing. Like if you go to my island, which is Penellicut Island, we're more known for our duck. Um, Preparing duck. So duck soup is something I highly recommend. It's very delicious. And you can go to where my mother grew up, which is Alert Bay, the northern tip of Vancouver Island. And yeah, their thing is like sockeye salmon. They're incredible with sockeye salmon, and they jar it, they smoke it. They have candied salmon. Um, other regions might be more famous for their deer or moose meat, preparing that, curing that. So, um, modern wise, I guess it would be bannock is probably like because that is yeah, I would say bannock is probably the most common staple for native people because it's spread throughout all of like Canada and I believe the parts of the U.S. as well.
Ooh,
visible. Interesting.
I always love a good conversation about food, y'all.
Yeah, heck yeah.
Is there anything that's, anything additional that you wanted to share in regards
Oh,
to our conversation?
uh,
Sorry.
before we give you free reign, I had
Yeah,
a question about your name.
sure.
Uh, your name is The Crow Show.
That's right. Yeah.
What reference and what attachment do you have to that to decide that for yourself on
Oh,
here?
so my name, The Crowshow. A lot of people think it's crow like the bird, but there's no W in my name for
Hmm.
crow. It's actually. Did you ever play Magic the Gathering?
I did not. I know of a
Okay.
lot of people that did, but
Yeah.
I was not one of them.
Yeah, so there's a Magic the Gathering card called Croesus the Purger. It's a dragon card.
Okay.
It was one of my favorite cards when I played Magic the Gathering. So I called myself Croesus uh, for the longest time, and then I just shortened it to Crow. And then when I was playing Counter Strike way back in the day with my friends, I aced a team on pistol round. That means that I
Hmm.
killed the whole team with my
Yep. Yeah. Yeah.
pistol.
Yeah.
And
Hmm.
I was like super hyped. I was freaking out. I was like, yeah, baby, I'm the Crow Show. I'm on 24/7. And I was like, I'll school these fools anytime. And
Yeah.
so that's how
It's
I
stuck.
created my own name. Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you guys
Oh,
have,
okay.
like, just a follow up question? Do you guys have like spiritual names that I want to know, like, the origins of that, right? Like, is that
Yeah.
something picked from birth? Is this something you take on yourself? Is this something your parents take on?
It's it's kind of it's kind of passed on to generations. Stays within the family typically. I can tell you my indigenous name. This is from my Penelica tribe. My name is Telekutston. My father shares that name, and many others share that name with me. And with that name, you can tell where I'm from and what band I grew up in, and um, yeah, any family that I belong to. Um, I do have a spirit animal. That whole so and so's my spirit animal. That's a real thing with us, and
Hmm.
Yep.
I can tell you that story. I told you about the ceremony I've been initiated into. It's
Right.
actually I can tell you some basics. It's a mask dance,
Hmm.
Hmm.
and my uncle carved our masks for us, my older brother and me, and we went to go pick them up. And this is one of the things that when people ask me if I believe in a higher power or higher forces or whatever, this is always one of the things I default to. I struggle with it still to this day, but he carved two masks, and we just knew which one belonged to each of us. There was two of them sitting there,
Hmm.
and he said, "Okay, choose." And I turned to my brother because he's my older brother. I was like, "You choose first."
Yeah.
And I swear, the moment we walked in, I couldn't take my eyes off my mask. I could not stop looking at it. I just felt drawn into my mask. And my brother pointed to his. He's like, "That's mine." And I breathed a sigh of relief. I was like, "I'm glad he didn't pick mine."
Hmm.
So, and my mask is it's a raven mask, and so what's associated with the raven is being a trickster.
Hmm.
It's a very
Cunning.
famous story about how the ravens stole the sun, um, put him in a box and stuff. And the raven was a trickster, and it's interesting because I was always a prankster and always a trickster, and I'm still very much an internet troll. So
Hmm.
I carry that tradition into the modern age, I guess you could say.
Wow, thank you for sharing that. That's very amazing. I never knew any of that.
Yeah.
In terms of, like, I've had some indigenous friends growing up, right? And they spiritually, when you speak to, like, their elders, they do share some stories with you, but your guys' spiritual culture is, I think, unlike anything, right? And I wish,
Hmm.
like, there was more awareness brought to it. And on top of that, it's just, even your ceremonies are so beautiful. Like, you can really
Hmm.
feel, like, divine power. Even just watching traditional dances, like on the internet, if anyone's like interested in watching it, it's just it's powerful,
Yeah, yeah, it
right?
really is. Yeah, yeah, and I think I can share this too. Like the mask that I have is carved out of cedar. Cedar is very powerful in our culture, and it's said to be alive.
Oh wow.
And I truly felt, I still feel that with my mask. I still feel very connected, and I'll never ever forget that feeling of just being so drawn to it that I couldn't just couldn't bear the thought to be away from my mask.
Oh wow. No,
Yeah.
that's
Beautiful story.
awesome. That was beautiful, truly. Anyways, we're gonna give you free reign, right? Just
Oh,
for the last
sure.
little bit here. Anything you want to talk about? Anything you want to share?
Fun
Well, you're
facts.
yeah. Some fun
fun
facts.
fun facts.
Mhm.
If you want fun facts, I've got lots of those. Non-indigenous related. I used to be an online film critic. Um,
Oh,
I went to many film festivals. I still go to them once in a while. I've been quoted in movie trailers. I was quoted in Jake Gyllenhaal's The Nightcrawler.
oh,
Um,
really?
yeah, I was in quoted in that trailer. Uh, I interviewed Keanu Reeves once.
Mm.
How was that?
Kevin Smith.
Was he just like how he was in the Ali Wong movie?
I wish. I wish. No, he was really intense. I thought he was mad at me, but he was just really passionate about his movie. I
Yeah.
was so
Uh,
scared. It's one of the
yeah.
few times I've ever been nervous. Um, and yeah, I've met some really really cool people through being an online film critic, and um, because I believe in a level of integrity, I never took selfies with the people I talked to because
Yeah. It's not self-publishing. Yeah.
yeah,
Publicity, yeah.
Hmm.
it it would look bad if I was like, "Yo, here I am with so and so, and by the way, their movie's really awesome." Like that's just
Hmm.
a bad look. Uh,
Absolutely.
and on that topic of movies, um, I'm just going to copy and paste this into the chat.
For sure. Sue, can you make
Um,
sure if it's a link you permit?
I'm just going to put the names.
Oh, okay.
So there are. Oh shoot, did I spell that right? Blood Quantum. I think I spelled that incorrectly.
I think I think there's a U instead of that
Yeah,
second A. Yeah.
yeah. So there are two movies. One's called Rhymes for Young Ghouls, and one called Blood Quantum. They're both directed by an Indigenous man from Quebec. His name is Jeff Barnaby. He's an incredibly talented filmmaker. Rhymes for Young Ghouls is actually like super gangster, and it's Native people in the movie, and it's
Oh.
about a bunch of young kids who are dealing drugs and um, going through residential school, um, dealing with drug and alcohol abuse from their parents. Um, it's a really bleak movie, but there's something also really beautiful and kind of therapeutic about the way it's shot and the story they tell. Um, and Blood Quantum is actually a zombie film where native people are immune to becoming zombies. So everybody else is becoming zombies, but native people are okay. And it's really cool. It's got a bit of anime kind of animation stuff in there.
Oh, okay. Wow.
Um, there's an older guy who is like a World War II veteran who he's native, but he has a samurai sword and he's a badass. It's awesome. And I would not recommend those films if I didn't believe in them 100%. So if you want a bit of indigenous art, those are two movies I highly, highly recommend.
No, that's awesome. Thank you. Yeah, chat, check it out. So, in regards to that, do we have any parting statements before we wrap up here?
Don't forget the link to the
Oh
video that
yeah,
we were referencing earlier.
the link
I
to
think
the
was there one or the
documentary.
two?
I
Yeah,
think
the
so.
documentary.
It
There's
was
two.
just the YouTube one.
Yeah.
Just the YouTube one.
Can someone post the YouTube documentary just on the channel? Do you have it there, Crow?
Oh yeah, yeah, I've got it here.
Perfect.
I'll post it. There it is in the chat. Yeah, it's called. I believe it's called Return to the Healing Circle.
Oh,
Uh,
post it one more time, Crow.
oh yeah, yeah, yeah. It's about it's about 45 minutes long. Oh, did
Zubal's
it
just
not
gonna tech it out for you. Just give him a moment here.
I can whisper it to Zubal. Yeah, there we go. I whispered it to Zubal, but it's called Return to the Healing Circle. It opens with some really harrowing stories
Hmm.
of residential school, but it's one that I think is very essential for people to watch, not just Canadians, but people worldwide, because I still talk to people every now and again who don't believe it happened. So I'm like, well,
Hmm.
Wow.
listen to my dad talk about it and
Numerous others.
my uncle. Yeah.
Hmm.
That's unbelievable. Yeah,
I'll have to
so
check that out.
this is another one, guys. Just the trailer. If you guys want a second movie to check out, it was called We Were Children. That's what someone brought to my attention in regards to the residential school. So that was my own personal kind of awakening to the subject. So definitely check out the links that we posted, guys. That was amazing. And I thank you again, Crow, deeply for coming onto our podcast and opening on to such a challenging topic because it's definitely not easy talking about, whether it's your
No.
trauma or someone else's trauma. And
Hmm.
you know what? Like everyone who's here, I hope that you guys go and give my Mans a follow, the smoothest voice on Twitch. But thank you so much, guys, for coming through on the podcast. That was definitely some brave space. I feel quite honored, quite frankly, to even to have heard this directly from you, my friend. So thank you
Humbled
so
even.
much. Absolutely.
Very much
Yeah.
appreciate it.
Yeah.
Opening
Thank you.
yourself.
Yeah. Thank you for the opportunity. And, my father, this is how he heals, by talking about it. I think it's the same for me.
Absolutely. Well, you know what? We're humbled by it. Truly. Humbled and honored, man.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you everyone for checking out. Again, this is our friend The Crow Show, right? Make sure you give him a follow. And I'm MF.
Nappy P.
All right. And thank you so much, guys, for just tuning in this evening. We super, super appreciate it. Thank you for coming
Very
into our
much.
brave space. Take care, everyone.